Hi, are you looking for some extra loot for your game? Do you maybe want some new crafting rules to kind of bring a little bit of life into that downtime activity? Well, the Treasure Vault book might just be for you. My name is Don. I'm trying to be the Sly Strategist, and let's go ahead and get into the new Treasure Vault's release. So, I do have the book here. I got it in the pocket edition just so I could kind of see what that's like, and it is a wonderful book. It is 223 numbered pages, full of information. This is more of a list of things than some of the other books that we've seen before. As it should be, this is treasure vaults. This is mainly treasures, items, things to wear. But there's whole new categories of things that I'd kind of like to go into. And rather than be quite so dry, what they've done in this is they've tried to make a little bit of a narrative at the header of each one of these sections. And most of the subsections, you basically have two narrators. You have a great dragon. The great dragon's name is, I'm going to read this because I don't want to screw it up, is Valashinaz is the dragon. And one of the caretakers of his vault is a kobold, and the kobold name is Purpurin. And at the beginning of every section, they kind of give you a little narrative as to what something is. And it's helpful. There's a section you'll see when we get to the momentary magic called Fulus, which, if you don't happen to know what that is, I believe it's Purpurin gives you the little introduction to what those are, and it tells you that they're basically magical labels that allow you to affix these to certain things to do special things. And we'll get into that when we get into the momentary magic. With that being said, this is, as far as I know and as far as I've seen, this is the biggest book of items, period, for Pathfinder 2nd edition. There isn't a collection of new items quite this big in anything else, just by the sheer volume of pages. So there's a lot to go over. It's broken into 6 main sections, and the 6 main sections I'd like to go into are armor and armament. That's a tough thing to say back to back. Alchemy Unleashed, momentary magic, trappings of power, secrets of crafting, which is that new crafting section. Game Master's Trove, super high powered things. And then we have the treasure tables. Treasure tables are basically a listing of a lot of these new items, prices, page references, so that you know where things are and how to, if someone were to go buy them or you wanted to sell them in one of the magic shops, you could go ahead and find out where they are. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start in the armor and armaments. This is basically your weapons and armor. It's runes, named armors, shields, and weapons. The listing is 18 new armors, 18 magic armors, 12 new shields, 7 new magic shields, 38 melee weapons. And there's some raid weapons as well as guns are included in this. This particular section, some of my favorite things that I found into it, and I'm not going to go over each and every individual listing. And this is probably one of the most straightforward sections, what you would expect to see. But in some of the named armors, library robes really stood out to me. The Starfall shield, I just love the look of it. And the best weapon, and quite possibly the best thing in this book that I can think of, maybe the pop-up book might be in competition, but the best thing I can think of is the piston gauntlets. And we'll show you a picture here of what they look like. It is Acme from Looney Tunes just all over, and I love them to death. I would love to get a set. From there, we're going to go ahead and go into the Alchemy Unleashed section. This is just a list of new types of ammunition and new types of... This is Alchemist, obviously. So ammunition, bombs, foods, which I think is fantastic. The funniest thing I see in the foods is they have this crackling bubble gum that is a counter to spells with an auditory effect because of crackling gum. I love it. Tools. Bottled monstrosities, super interesting, and I suggest you go ahead and take a look at these. By this point, this should be on the Archives of Nethys by now if you don't want to buy the book. I always suggest support the publisher. They put out a lot of good stuff for us. So if you can, support the publisher. If not, check on Archives of Nethys. But yeah, check out Crackling Bubblegum. They have the tools. We were on Bottled Monstrosities, but you can get like a Kraken bottle, which is a literal Kraken in a bottle. Elixirs, permanent items. And by permanent items, we are talking about things that aid in the crafting. And what else would you have but poisons in your alchemy thing? So that whole new alchemist section has a whole bunch of new things that really add a lot of flavor. Once again, love the food section. That's probably one of my favorite things. Next, we're going to go into a section called Momentary Magic. Momentary Magic are things that are transient. They don't last very long. One-time use. Think of it that way. It's impermanent magic. So we have catalysts, which are, think of it as alchemy for magic. There is one, let's do a good example for, I have it written down here, a Fearcracker. Fearcracker is basically a little firecracker that has a bunch of broken mirror particles in it. And if you cast the mirror image spell, it warps the mirror images. So that provides a little bit of hard to hit confusion type thing. And then if one of the mirror images that you cast is destroyed, well, it distorts, causing fright to the monster, and could put them in a frightened 1 upon an image death. So these are additional physical components to spell casting that are boosts. Love it. Fulus, which we mentioned before. Fulus are magical labels. There's a bunch of these. I like them a lot. Two of my favorite are, there's Ghost Courier and Ghost Delivery. These are labels you can put on something and they do what they do. They would send a message to someone or do a delivery to someone. You can attach ghost messages to the Ghost Courier thing, but they are individual magical labels that do one thing one time and then they're done. You have magical ammunition, one-time use. Various things in there that I suggest you take a look at. Missives, these are interesting. My favorite one of these is an explosive missive. So you can basically pay to have these done. And it can be text or it can be an image. And the tenor of the note or the depiction in the image would determine the spell effect. So if you had, I believe this is their text in the book, but I think this is funny. If you have corrosive language, then you would have a acid spell. If you have a image you're doing is of a castle burning, then that would be the effect. And the damage you can do is, I do not have this written down. I believe it's 4d6. Could be wrong. That's not particularly important, but what the missives are, these are notes you can kind of have written. And I think it'd be fun to create like an NPC based off this missive thing that is like a notary public for destruction. I could see that being a cool little thing in your own little homebrew setting, hometown. You also have oils. Oils are temporary buffs and boosts for items, weapons, and people. Kind of what you think it would be. Anti-rust. You can increase your health or the healing power. We'll say that healing potency. So, they're just temporary. They usually last 24 hours. Then you have talismans. Talismans are what you think they are. They do some type of protection, some type of aura, but they are temporary. You do have something, and we'll get into that in a further section here, that there are things that are a bit more permanent, but talismans are temporary. And then you have wondrous consumables. Wonder that doesn't tell you a lot, but what they're referring to there are things like spell guns, companion treats, which I think is kind of interesting. potion patches, which I love. It's almost like a nicotine patch for a healing potion. Pretty cool. One of the coolest things I saw, and it might put you in mind of a different game entirely, and I don't want to even bring up the name, but they have a wind ocarina, and after you use the power that's in the wind ocarina, then it just becomes an ocarina, but it doesn't go away. The ocarina still exists. It just has nothing else besides being an ocarina, which doesn't need to be more. Then you have the trappings of power section. This is kind of interesting. Once again, I fully suggest you look at the Archives of Nethys for the things that are in this section. I could do a big, I don't know, 30, 40-minute video just on what's in this alone. However, Apex items. I'm going to leave this short because there's some really cool stuff in there, but this is what would make it super long. They are highly sought after items, very specific, gives you ideas. It gives you these specific things, can also give you ideas for what these Apex items are. Actually, some of the tags on it, you know how it has finesse and agile? It has Apex. So it is the height of crafting. Assistive items, fantastic stuff. Companion mobility aids, charms that you can do. There are assistive companions, such as companions that are chairs or means of propulsion. You have other assistive aids for sight, for breathing, balance, mobility, hearing, prosthetics. If you have a character who lost an arm or a leg or limb in a fight, great section. A whole bunch of things that you wouldn't necessarily think about. And you know, maybe it's not important to you. It's important to people, though. It's important to me. I think it's great that it's in there. Here goes my second favorite category of items. That is this one. The first one was the foods in the alchemical section. The thing I want to go here is grimoires, only because of one item. They have an item called an amazing pop-up book. And what it is it is written by kobolds. It is a visual representation of the spells. So let's say you were to prepare a spell from this spell book. It's a pop-up. It's a visual representation. And you fail. If you fail, hopefully I'm reading this correctly. If not, someone will correct me and I will put it in the description with a time thing saying what the correction is. But this is how I read it. So please, I hope I'm right here because it sounds fantastic. Even if you fail, then the representation of the pop-up in the book, if it's an illusion, so it's an illusion. You fail you fail the spell casting. They make their saving throw, so your illusion doesn't work. Well, the pop-up would still show up as the pop-up on a grand scale. Fantastic. There's another one that's communion, which I think is it's a communion mat. So it's basically a mat for both you and your familiar. If your familiar learns a spell by reading the text on the outline of the map, then and cast that spell during the day, during the the time period during your adventuring session, the deity would know. Your deity would know that you cast a spell through that mat, and would see that as favor because you are, giving them attention. So it would allow your familiar to sustain one of your spells for a period of time because they used a spell that they learned while they were preparing for the day on this mat. Cool. How cool is that? Held items are kind of what you think they are. Things that you have to have a free hand for and you have to hold in your hand to use. A good example of this one is they have a battle medic baton, which is snake baton. You have to hold it and gives you bonuses when you're using battle medic for your rolls. Spell hearts. This is what we were talking before with talismans. Talismans are momentary, limited use items. Spell hearts are talismans, but permanent. I'm going to kind of leave it at that. Then the rest of this is And I don't want to belittle this by just saying, well, it's just this. But there's a lot of them, so I don't want to go into all of them. Otherwise, once again, this video could be forever long. Staves, wands, musical items, worn items, including accessories such as, like belts and holsters and things like that. Runes for these accessories and clothing. Just tons and tons of stuff. That's a great section as well. Here is where we're going to get into something that a lot of people, I'm probably not going to do it, crafting. I get it. It is useful. It's not my big passion, but there are a ton of good videos out here already about what the specific changes are to this from here. But I'll do an overview of it, and it's called basically the Secrets of Crafting section. This section clarifies a lot of the rules that already exist, as well as it introduces some new alternate rules, which I find very, very interesting. Some of the rules are like it'll decrease crafting time by increasing the difficulty of the rule. That's an interesting little thing. There are now new rules for deconstructing items and repurposing items. Those are some alternate rules that were introduced. It's something that people have thought about to use in the past, and they've asked about, but it's really been a little bit unclear of how you would take apart something you already created and possibly reuse a subcomponent. So that's in there. Here are the big new additions that I think will be really helpful, especially if you. The one that I think is very interesting is druids, for the druid crafting, nature crafting. It allows druids and their companions and wild creatures to basically grow by crafting. Super interesting. Then there are crafted items that are part of a story. By that, you could have a adventure or campaign that is literally about collecting the items in order to create an ultimate weapon. That's making me think of Ultima. I don't want to name the game, but we'll do a FF type, creating an FF type weapon. That it has a section for that, for a story type thing, and how you would go about doing that. That is basically your crafting section. And after that, we're going to go into the Game Master Trove. Game Master Trove, this is clearly for the GM. It's not for. There's nothing wrong with anybody looking at it whatsoever. But this is clearly for the GM. These are largely end game type items that a GM would need to really, man, they would need to sit down and figure out how it would fit into the world, because some of these are, I mean, they're big. I don't want to say world breaking, that's a bit excessive, but they are powerful. So it isn't something that you have this section and you have four players in your party and you're like, okay, each of you pick one from this list. No, that'd be a bit much. So you need to be careful how to introduce them. 8 new artifacts, 2 archetype artifacts that are meant to be paired with a free archetype variant rule. Blighted Bones consumables, which basically give you uses. However, you go through stages of a curse by using them. You also have 8 cursed items, 13 intelligent items, so sapient, as well as there are like new aspects for existing relics, and there's a few new relics in there. This is basically a section that is great for a GM to kind of put as goals in their game. Pretty great section. Then the last part, I will bring this up again just so I can show you what I mean by treasure tables. When I say treasure tables, I'm literally mean, let's see if I can get a good focus here, tables of treasure. That's what it is. It tells you items, it tells you the price, it tells you what page number, so you can have them on a market, know how much to charge for them, or how much to sell them for, or to determine how much crafting time it would take based on the value of the item. And then we get into my favorite section of any of these Paizo books. If you've read any of my other reviews of books itself, they do this fantastic thing where the glossary and the index are in one. That's not revolutionary. Plenty of other books done before, but there are other role-playing systems that I've seen who shall remain nameless that only include an index and don't put the glossary attached to the index. Look, if you want to look something up and you just need a refresher, that little glossary section is going to be enough. If it's not enough, it takes to the whole section that you need to go back to in order to read it. Love it. It should be in every book ever created. Bit excessive, but I really like that section. So with that, I hope you got something out of this video. There's a lot in it. I would really recommend anybody get it who wants it. This is really for a GM. There's nothing wrong with a player getting it if you never plan on GMing at all. And once again, all this stuff will be in Archives of Nethys. However, this book is really for a GM. Or maybe an aspirational player who wants to see what they can get when they get to level 20. But I do recommend you get it. Illustration's fantastic. Let's get to one of the... I hadn't really mentioned that, but we'll go ahead and do... I just saw the bubblegum. So we were talking about the alchemical food. There's that bubblegum I was talking about. But if it describes something, it shows you what they look like. When we're talking about weapons, it shows you what the weapons look like, so you have an idea in your head what these things are. Great book. I really suggest you get it. PDF version is great because I got that as well. That's where most of the images that I might be pasting up here will be from. They're from the PDF. So buy it, support the publisher, or get your things off Archives of Nethys. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close this video off. I do hope that it was enjoyable for you. If it was, please like or subscribe if you want to. It's great and kind of helps out. But with that, I hope you have a great day and happy adventuring. Thanks.